Many people switch to the GNU+Linux operating systems for the wrong reasons. The correct reason to switch to GNU+Linux distros is because of software freedom. But unfortunately, a lot of people may mistakenly switch to the GNU+Linux distros because of some practical superiority of the operating system as compared to other operating systems. While it is definitely a nice benefit to running a GNU+Linux distribution to have superior technology as compared to other operating systems that people may run, it is still the wrong reason to switch to the GNU+Linux distros, just for that technological superiority of the operating system. Because people who do not switch to the GNU+Linux distributions because of software freedom are unlikely to care about software freedom unless they come to know about it at a later date. But if your reason remains, your reason to stay with GNU+Linux, if it remains the technological superiority of the operating system, if that stays as your reason, if that remains your reason to stay with the operating system, then what happens one day when a proprietary operating system comes along which offers technological superiority to the GNU+Linux distributions? What happens then? Well, in case the only value you have in your head is to use the best practical software for the job, then unfortunately a lot of these people may just switch to those proprietary operating systems because they now offer a better software, better technology. So if you are some sort of a software programmer and you find it, this is an example. So as a software programmer, you might find the availability of programming software on GNU+Linux to be better. Well, what happens if there is one day a proprietary operating system that does everything better? A lot of users may end up switching to those proprietary operating systems. So it's then not really a good state. The situation is not in a good state if a lot of the people who are using the GNU+Linux operating system don't even care about the values that the system was started to pursue. There are other cases in which this might become a problem, because if you're using the GNU+Linux operating system, although it may be free software, you can still run proprietary software on it. So if you don't care about software freedom and you are only running the GNU+Linux operating systems because of its practical superiority, then you might end up running proprietary software on the GNU+Linux distro. To an extent, that defeats the purpose because you don't achieve software freedom that way. And then such users will not make demands for that software to be made free. If you are comfortable running a proprietary software on your computer, chances are you're not gonna be demanding the publisher of that program to make the software free software. It is of course possible to run proprietary software and still demand that, but the chances are that they might not, if they never cared about software freedom in the first place. See, we are talking about the people who switch to the operating system for the wrong reasons in the first place. If the reason is only practical superiority, practical advantage and benefits, then that is the wrong reason. Because one day there might be a proprietary operating system that's better in practice to do the job. Unfortunately, if that day comes, then all of the user base might just end up leaving. And that's bad. And of course, it's also bad because, well, really, it if the users are not perpetuating the values of software freedom, the values that the operating system, the GNU operating system, was started for, that's the reason it was started, to pursue software freedom, to give the users of computers freedom to do their computing. So, if the users, a vast number of people using the GNU+Linux distros, if they don't care about software freedom, then they are not going to perpetuate those values. And eventually, there may come a point when many people don't hear about those values at all, even if they switch to the GNU+Linux distro. So one might think that, well, even if you switch to the GNU+Linux distros initially for the wrong reasons, you might then later come across those philosophies as you are delving deeper into the world of GNU+Linux and free software. But that's not necessarily guaranteed, because if there are too many of these people who are not interested in software freedom, then the discussion on software freedom is going to be drowned by the other people talking about other things that have nothing to do with software freedom. So the actual philosophy that the operating system was started for will be basically, it will become obscure at the scene, the operating system scene, on the very people who are using the GNU+Linux distro. In that very world, it will become obscure. The very reason that the operating system was started for will be unknown to many of the users of that operating system, and that's bad. That's not an ideal situation to have, and to a large extent that may already be the case, because I'm aware of many people I'm aware of many people who know of GNU+Linux and might even have experimented it with a few times, but who are not at all knowledgeable on the philosophical reasons that the operating system was started for. And that is a thing. And I'm just talking about, like, hypothetically, that, well, in some sense I'm talking about hypothetically, but it's already a thing in the real world. I'm just presenting the ideas. Anyway, but it is a fact, it is a thing in the real world. There are a lot of people who are using GNU+Linux, and they don't know about the philosophy that the operating system was started for. And that is really unfortunate. And then, when that keeps going and going, eventually the idea of software freedom may become so overwhelmingly obscure and unknown to the point that people won't even recognize it anymore. And then the massive number of people who don't care about those values, they will have more power on that side which might potentially oppose the values, the original values even. Because they don't care about those values, they never heard from those values. They switched to the operating system for the wrong reasons, and no one ever told them, because they never cared. No one ever told them, and they didn't switch for those reasons. And it goes on and on, until eventually many generations of computer users there's just no one left. There will never be no one left, but like, there will be only so few of them left eventually that, well, that's the hypothetical future predicting scenario, this part, that there might come a point in time in the future where the values of software freedom are so obscure that people don't even recognize them anymore. It will basically be seen as even more fringe of an idea as it already is, to the point that it's just no one knows about it anymore. And that's not a good place to be in, because, well, if you don't have those values of software freedom, well, then the operating system is just going to become proprietary one day, and no one is going to care about that, because they never cared about user freedom in the first place. So, never mind a new operating system showing up that's proprietary and people switching to it. GNU+Linux itself will become proprietary one day, as the amount of people who don't care about software freedom far outweighs the amount of people who do care about software freedom, the power will be held by those people who don't care about software freedom. And then all kinds of bad things happen when those people are let rule the free software world. Yeah, it is unfortunate. Currently at this state, at least GNU+Linux, well, at least people still know about the reason to an extent, and it is still somewhat known, but not enough. Like I said, there are some people, a lot of people, many people who don't know about the philosophical reasons for GNU+Linux. There are many people. There are many such people out there in the world already. Fortunately, it has not gone as far as the future prediction hypothetical scenario where the information just becomes very unknown, where almost no one knows about the philosophical reasons anymore. Now that's just something that might happen, who knows. But even just having a few people, or even as many as there are now, who don't know about the philosophical values, well, that risks something like that happening in the future, that if these people who don't know about these values, if they then spread the software, and then they perpetuate their own wrong ideas, then that's just gonna cause that scenario to happen, where eventually the people using the GNU+Linux operating system in general won't even know about software freedom at all. And that's very much harmful. It's not gonna be good for anyone then. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to do as much as can be done to promote the philosophy that the operating system was started to pursue. Started for to pursue. I don't know how is that sentence supposed to be said? The philosophy that the operating system was started for to pursue. Is that the correct way to say it? I think it is. Okay. Anyway, it's important to spread the idea. If someone was to say that the operating system doesn't belong to the users, to the people who value the software freedom, that anyone can use the operating system for any reason, then sure. But make no mistake, the people who are against the values of software freedom are the enemies of software freedom. So, while they may be allowed to use the GNU+Linux operating system and believe whatever they want to believe or whatever nonsense, that doesn't mean that it's a good thing, and that's not something we should support. If you value software freedom, don't make the mistake of contributing and supporting people who are against software freedom. That's a big mistake, because you are going to hurt your own cause. If you want to promote user freedom, then you should promote user freedom, and don't participate in activities that don't talk about user freedom, because then you're promoting the non-user freedom concerned ideas instead. Don't promote those ideas, promote user freedom. So talk about software freedom. Use the correct terminology. Call the software free libre software instead of any other weird terms that have nothing to do with software freedom. And such things, because, and also importantly also, talk about the operating system with the correct terminology also. It is the GNU+Linux operating system. Because that also helps to promote the philosophy of the GNU project, because, well, if you're not even mentioning it in the name, then the people who hear you talk about operating system are not going to hear about GNU, and they are not going to hear about GNU's values. They are not going to associate the operating system with GNU if you don't talk about GNU when you are talking about the operating system. So it is not only the correct way to refer to the operating system in a purely technical way. GNU+Linux is the correct term. Not only that, but it is actually a good way to promote the values. of the GNU project by simply just saying that it is from the GNU project, because when you're talking about the operating system that the GNU project made, and then if you talk about it with the correct terminology, you use the GNU in the name, well then you're promoting GNU and you're spreading awareness that this comes from the GNU project and this is GNU software and GNU has their philosophy. So it is a useful way to promote their values in that way also, to just say it in the name. But it's not like it's just only for that purpose. It is still the technically correct way, and even if you don't agree with the values of the GNU project, you should still include it in the name, of course, because it is still the correct way to do it. It is still the technically correct way. So there is no room for any disagreement on that. Of course, people will disagree, but they're just wrong. GNU+Linux is the name, so refer to it by the correct name. But it's especially important to do that if you want software freedom. You have to promote software freedom, and you're not gonna do that if you talk about other things and you don't credit the people who actually did the work and started the movement. If you credit all the software to wrong philosophies and wrong people who don't stand for software freedom, basically, if you give all the credit for the GNU+Linux operating system to Linus Torvalds, for example, well then you are not promoting user freedom, because Linus Torvalds himself doesn't believe in software freedom. Linus Torvalds has said that he's just interested in technology. The GPL license to him is just a means to get the source code contributions from third parties who do software development for the kernel. So he just uses it for the copyleft. He just chose the license so that people will contribute software, the source code. So he doesn't care about software freedom. So if you give credit for the operating system to Linus Torvalds, then you're not giving credit to the ideas of software freedom that started the operating system. The values that Richard Stallman started the operating system for, they need to be actually promoted and talked about, discussed, if that's your goal. Never mind any stupid reasons someone might have about not wanting to say the GNU. Well, if you're not gonna say that, then you are hurting the cause, whether you agree with the cause or not. And a lot of people, I believe, use this to their advantage who oppose the GNU project, because like I just talked about, saying the GNU does indeed promote the values of the GNU project. So there are people who are actively against the GNU project. So of course they will avoid the terminology. They will avoid discussing GNU. They instead prefer calling the entire operating system by the name of the kernel, effectively giving all the credit to Linus Torvalds, because they don't want Richard Stallman and his views to be mentioned. So because there are people who are actively against the GNU project and the software freedom, it's important to fight back against that, and spread the awareness. Yes. For if you don't, then who will? Basically, everyone has to do it. Especially if you value the software freedom. But even if you don't, GNU+Linux is still the correct terminology. It's still the technically correct way. So you should do that either way, whether you agree with the GNU people or not. Well, they made the operating system, so they get the credit. Whether you agree with the GNU project or not, they did it. They made the operating system. You have to give them the credit. It's silly that it's even tolerated in the free software world that people don't give credit to the GNU project. They started the operating system. Regardless of whether you agree with their philosophy or not, they started it, so you give them credit. It's the correct thing to do in every way. Every way, it's the technically correct way. It's the morally right thing to do, because they are the ones who started it, so give them credit. And also it's useful for those who want to promote the ideas of software freedom to draw attention to the GNU project by saying the word GNU. So it's correct in every way. Well, unless you don't agree with the GNU project. But it's still the correct way to do it. You should still do that. Either way. Sucks to be you if you disagree with the GNU project. and still have to use the GNU in the name. Well, they made the operating system. If you don't want to talk about the GNU operating system, then you can talk about any other operating system out there. Yeah, you're welcome to talk about anything else. Yeah, you don't get to claim it for yourself just because you disagree with the values that Richard Stallman started the operating system for. And also, avoid all the other weird movements that are weird competitors, perhaps, to the free software movement, who use weird terminology to refer to free software. Free software is only free software, and there's no other way to refer to the software. There's only one correct way. Well, libre software is basically just a translation of free software, so it's the same thing. Whatever language you use to refer to the software, then those are just translations, but it's the same thing. Free software is software that respects the user's freedom. So talk about it as free software. There's no other correct term for that software.